And fingers crossed, there's a chance you might see me. Hey, it's Thursday once again, and 7 p.m. Central Time. I am not in the Central Time Zone. I'm in the Eastern Time Zone of the US, and I think we're on daylight savings now. So, either case, it's normal time. And welcome to ADRAMADA, another Dave Rush Ask Me Anything digital alchemy. We get together once a week or so on Thursday nights and talk tech. I am, in fact, your tech from Texas. This is ADRAMADA, and they call me. Did they call me, or did I invent this? The Commodore ADRAMADA, making you the proud ADRAMADA Armada. I can't speak. I'm out of my element. I just don't do well moving to a new studio. I've been here for a couple of days. I've had a chance to put everything together. My first test was about 30 minutes ago. So, no, it's not a Texas Tech shirt. I grabbed what I thought was a Texas Tech gray and red shirt when I left the house on Tuesday morning back in Texas. And I pulled it out of my baggage this morning and said, oh man, that's not Texas Tech, but I'm in Ohio, so I'm probably not going to get arrested. Good, glad I'm here. Thank you, guys. And I'll tell you what, I'm going to set Uncle Phone up since Scott is here. If anything were to happen, feel free to send me a ping, Senor Scott. So good afternoon, good evening, everyone, wherever you are in the world. We are here because of tech. This show is devoted to collecting and disseminating information on technology and its uses. And in particular, we're interested in how the advancement of tech impacts our daily and our long-term lives. We range over a broad spectrum of topics, and I'm not going to list them off to you. I did that a week ago. Today is, if you're not watching live, you're catching us on the archive, Thursday, March 21st. And I'm on the road, brought enough gear that I could put together a show if I couldn't get a backup substitute host. Hey, by the way, anybody who's ever interested in being a substitute host for those rare occasions that I've got to miss, send me a message. We will work it out. There's a million ways that we do it. You basically turn it into your show if you want, or I can give you notes and say, here's what I was going to talk about, and here's all my whatever, my outlines, whatever. So if you're interested, do it. We've got a Discord server, and that's a great way to get in touch with me. There's also a lot of stuff going on that server. There's lots of tech discussions through that whole broad range, and every now and again somebody says, I got something I want to talk about. We don't have a channel for that. Well, that problem gets solved lickety splat. So the invite for that is on the chat feed. Of course, it's a great way, an easy way to get in touch with me. JPJ had a PBJ. And of course, we all know the significance of PBJ. Everybody, if you're watching on the archive, Scott Jernigan is here, master instructor and wearer of many, many, many hats. And he created one of the world's greatest analogies to teach programming or methodologies, and that was using a peanut butter jelly sandwich. So feel free to throw that joke in anytime you want, and we will all laugh. And if you ever get to catch his class where he taught that, so much the better. I've also placed in the chat feed, Python is my fave language. Mine too. Not good at it, but definitely my fave. I've got email addresses if you ever want to get in contact with me in the chat feed, and that takes man, I can't spell. Opportunit YR. There we go, opportunity. Let me start this off with kind of an opportunity for you. You guys know that I have a close relationship with the nice folks over at Rocky Linux. Getting closer and closer, and God willing, it turns into something where they wind up paying me someday and letting me do stuff for them. But until then, I participate with them to some degree and communicate with a lot of them. They are getting ready to hold a contest. They cannot hold their contest yet. It's a giveaway. They're giving away this nice logo Rocky CIQ backpack. And the trigger to kick off that contest is for them to get 1,000 YouTube subscribers. And it's moving up. They got 951. They started their weekly show today with in the 940s, so they got a few more today. Would you consider subscribing to their site? I'm putting it in the chat feed here. Give them a nice thumbs up. They only need 40 more people. And then what they're going to do is they're going to take those 1,000 subscribers and draw their names, draw a name from a hat. And one of those folks is going to get get this backpack. So you don't have to do it, but it would be very nice for them and perhaps for you. You could really make it miserable, Tullowit. You could be a subscriber and win. And oh man, we got to ship a backpack to Hawaii. Because I learned how painful that is. Let's see who's here. Yes, you may talk about anything. Keep it clean. We are generally, what is the bit rate is higher than recommended bit rate. Too bad. I'm not fixing anything on the fly. What have I learned? Keep it family friendly, and we're good for just about anything here. Cool. Not yet. Can I talk about anything? Yeah. Scott says, did you learn any programming with that, JBJ? Okay, now, yeah. Everybody checking in with each other. Subbed. No, don't feel bad, because I found that alternative shipping, which was so much better. That rare moment in time when using the US Post Office is a better alternative than the too biggie commercial. Okay, 3 if you want to count DHL in, but no, it was totally acceptable. I'm very happy. Oh man, we got a fair amount of live viewers. It's much larger than normal. That's because we had such a good show last week, right? Man, that was a good show. Speaking of which, so we're going to try and do some sharing here. I'm using Zoom instead of OBS, so things are going to look a little different, act a little different, but we'll see how she goes. Last week, can I share this? No, I got to do it this way. Share screen. And I didn't do a slide for that. But that's weird because I did. So just wait a second here. Go over there, go over there. Close that. That's something I could have practiced with, huh? Excuse me. Okay, this. Nope, okay, I didn't do a slide for that. Anyway, last week we talked to a couple of the staff, the president and CEO of Snaju and one of their managers. We talked with Zach and Adam, and man, what a company. What an organization. 4 people, 5 people, and to do all of the stuff that they do. Unbelievable. If you guys are watching tonight, I will be down there. I mentioned this to you in a note, but I'm coming down the first week of April to that part of town, bearing gifts. And Scott, I'm going down there that week because I'm having lunch with Doug. So it's a fun day. Today we're going to talk about the rapidly being adopted, boy, that's good grammar, of 2.5 GBE. I keep running across it regularly where people are talking about it. I'm installing it. I'm having trouble installing it, whatever. And I've been seeing that for 6 months or so, and I haven't paid much attention to it. And finally, I had a double occurrence of it one day and said, you know what, I got to look into this, and if it's interesting, share it. And man, is it interesting. It's fun. So that's what we're going to do. Upcoming shows next week, a project and a guest. We're going to do a project called Globbing. Look it up. And we're going to have guest Laura Tate on. She runs a PC repair business. The following week, tentatively planned, is our snake oil episode. I will talk a little bit about more of that. I talked about it last week. I need input on this. I want you to send me information about tinfoil hat products, stuff that's being sold to the gullible. This will protect you from this. That almost everything I run across seems to be something protective in nature, but there's got to be some other wacky snake oil stuff out there. So shoot me that and I will include it. I've got 5 on my list right now, but again, protective, 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 and that gets old. April 11th, show after that, normal show. I don't know what the project is going to be. Not going to do a guest because we've got guests too frequently. But the week after that, our special guest will be Greg Soul from Rocky, CIQ, and other things. So let us see who's here, and then we will start tech news. Man, I got some fun tech news this week. And the tech news this week, I guess I'll give you a heads up. It's a lot of it is very AI oriented. How's that? Oh, no, don't feel okay. The Tellurwood. In other news, our Ada Mini Pro at church kept filling its buffer, wrecking our live stream. So the nice folks in charge bought you a YOLO Box Ultra. Set it up this week. First use is this Sunday. I don't have the link to your service and I would like to watch. So I'm sure you will send that to me on the back in the back cave or something like that. That'd be fun. Thanks. Okay, good, good, good. Oh, and I didn't do the early greetings. I just jumped right in here. So, oh, I don't have timestamps set up on this machine. I don't know who got in when. Timestamps. There we go. Click. And why do I? Wow. I am trying to do thing. There we go. Okay, moderation is shown and timestamps 10 hours later. I don't know when you got here. Timestamps won't turn on. That's what happens when you go on the road and you do these remote things, right? Hey, I got timestamps. Okay. So, because I'm always curious to see when Tullowit turns up for the first time. Weather advisory tonight. I don't have the timestamp on that. Anyways, Tullowit turned up a little before showtime. I have no idea how to read this. If it puts time in the time zone that you are, because when I set up the show, I have to use the time of my present time zone. If I try and set it for 7 o'clock, I normally would at home, then it came up as 6. So I don't know. Anyways, people turned up early before the show, as ever and always. Tullowit and Shia Moonstone, always our first lately. And Scott poked in just before showtime, and then 8. You big eater, you. Okay, moving down. Abu Bakr Al Hajj is here late at night, early in the morning for you. Nice to see you, my friend. Abu Bakr and I have known each other from these kinds of programs for 3 years more. And I think we just recently connected on LinkedIn like last week or early this week. But I see all of his posts. He sees all of mine. Okay, first week. Oh, yeah, first week. I was working in my brother-in-law's church yesterday, looking over a problem he's got with his audio system. I'm going to bring some equipment back next time I come to this state in August. Okay, you'll send me the link. I meant as far as snake oil products. I miss Trisha. Antivirus for mobile phones. I don't, yeah. It's an interesting concept, right? Because we used to say you don't need antivirus for Macs because there was only 14 Macs in the world. But now they are just as subject to malware as anything else. And it's not unreasonable to think that malware could very easily, well, and malware does infect cell phones. We get recalled apps all the time because they have malware in them. And you would think that a good anti-malware would protect against that, or at least identify it. Jason Helms, what's the fastest speed in y'all's area? My company I'm with announced 5 gig up and down. Wow. I would be embarrassed to tell you the speed I have at my house. 70. No, I think they bumped it to 140 recently. Who's hurting? I can't. Who's hearting? I can actually see hearts. Somebody. I have a theory who it was. Wouldn't that be interesting if it, had like initials or something under the heart so you could see who's hearting? Found a link to download more. I hope that's snake oil. Heck yeah, send me that. That's awesome. Back in the day, they had the old RAM doubler, right? Well, and of course, Linux has RAM compression. Uh, it's really good. If you don't need max performance all the time and you need more RAM, you can use the RAM compressor. You signed in this morning at 7:45 your time. Okay, it's already drifted off my screen. Emojis are making me laugh. Nice to see you, everybody. Good, good. Hello, Babakar. And that's the first time I correctly pronounced his name on my first effort. I've always made it Abu Bakr, but it's Abu Bakr. So very good. Alash. I never heard anyone doing 5G, so I was in shock. Yeah, I mean, I've certainly seen that commercially and much higher, but never on a residential scale. All right, well, let's see what we've got going on in the grand scheme of tech news. All right, I got to figure this thing out. There, Zoom, share screen. Hey, if this works, it's going to be really cool. I got 2 slides here. Okay, I'm up in the corner. So we'll see how this works. So you're looking at Betelgeuse, the star. And we're going to call this a tech news story, but it drops off and it goes into one of my favorite areas to talk about. So while this is Betelgeuse and it's going to be a story about the ongoings of Betelgeuse, this is a story about the state of AI. And it had nothing to do with the article here. This was just something that as I read the article, and because I was into some AI stuff this week and some research, I put 2 and 2 together and said, oh man, these 2 things really mesh. You'll see what I mean. Bear with me. So current AI is trained by looking at a lot of data that is comprised of known or existing information, images, sounds, etc. And from there, ostensibly, it extracts and morphs what they call new or generated or generative output. But that output isn't really the result of intelligence, artificial or otherwise. Artificial intelligence doesn't have, here comes a key word in this little diatribe, ideas. It just recycles existing information. There is no AI out there that acts intelligently. We could do 40 hours on this. I'm not going to do it. But I've shared this quote before from one of my favorite folks over at Texas Tech and many other credentials. There is no artificial intelligence. It's all obscure scripting with unexplored failure outcomes or plagiarism as a service. So it's just taking existing stuff and rewording it, repackaging it. And that came from Alan Sill over at Texas Tech. He's with the National Science Foundation and the Cloud Association conglomerate or whatever, the CAC. Okay, so now let me segue back into Beetlejuice. So besides being a scary character in a movie, and by the way, the sequel is in pre-production with most of the original cast, it's a big dying star. It is out of nuclear fuel. And it has expanded to the diameter, if you want to call it that, the radius of our sun to Jupiter. The star is that big. It's huge. It's hot. Stuff bubbles up from the core and bursts onto the surface, and then it cools and sinks back down into the lava miasma of it all. Scientists, I'm going to try this slide. Let me see if this works. This is a GIF And I'm hoping that the motion shares as I talk about this. I'll know in a minute. I'm not looking at your stuff. So scientists are having a tough time with old Betelgeuse because its outer radius, its outer circumference, is spinning, per their measurements, at a little over 5 kilometers per second, about 3.1 miles per second. For something that big to rotate that fast is unimaginable in the minds of cosmologists. Now, we find all kinds of exceptions to what they think are the rules. And so, who knows? Maybe the thing is spinning that fast, but they don't buy it and they think there must be another explanation. And it's all about measuring it. And maybe there's a problem with their measure methodologies. I don't know. They think that something that big should have a maximum rotational speed of 1 to 1.5 kilometers per second, not 5 kilometers per second. So here we go. New word here, part of my AI diatribe. We're going to put this all together in a second. A curious researcher came up with an idea, 2 words here, curious and idea, that it's not really spinning that fast. He posits that the way we measure this with millimeter telescopes, millimeter RF telescopes, that some of the stuff that's bubbling up appears as motion. It gets more complicated than that, but I'm just going to leave it at that for the moment. And so we could dive into that. And the point of this potential discovery or potential explanation is the result, ready, of more than just recycling extant information. It comes from curiosity and this marvelously undefinable characteristic of the brain that can connect disparate elements to create something truly new, something wondrous, an idea. And that's what artificial intelligence doesn't have. Maybe gets someday, but if we dive into the definition of an idea, it's a transcendent thought. It's something that says, this is totally new. We connected some things together and said, hey, you know what? This could happen. This is something that at the moment only brains can do. So I propose that, I'm not a neuroscientist, so this has probably long been proposed, but I haven't dug that deep into it, that intelligence needs a couple of elements that aren't discussed when we talk about artificial intelligence. It needs an element of curiosity, not a random algorithm that triggers more training, but legitimate curiosity. Like, you ever see a basket of kittens? Everybody's seen a basket of kittens. Do you start wondering? I mean, the first thing you want to do is run over and pet them. Okay. But people start asking questions. There's a batch of a cat and 5 kittens. I wonder how many kittens are in a typical litter. Curiosity. AI doesn't do that. AI doesn't look at something and wonder about more, about depth. It just gets handed more stuff to read. What else did I have there? How many kittens in a litter? How long till they open their eyes? All these kinds of things that people are curious about, and non-people, animals. So there's questions that things like AI can create descriptive output, but there's no drive. That's curiosity. It's drive in my mind. And more than that, from the hands of a non-neuroscientist that has yet to reach that undefinable quality that truly creates something new, having been triggered by curiosity. Okay. I'm done with that. This is my AI rant. Next, space news. T Corona Borealis, which you can see on my little map here, to the right of Hercules and to the left of Arcturus, somewhere roughly in the middle there. It is expected, now it's about 3,000 light years away. So this has already happened, of course, 3,000 years ago. But it is expected to go supernova from our viewpoint this year. And when it does, it should be visible to the naked eye for about a week. They don't know when it's going to happen. It could be wrong. It could be a year, 2, 5, 10, whatever. But this thing is just bubbling and blowing like crazy. So it's at present a tiny white dwarf. It's the core of a dead star. And by amazing bit of cosmology, it's orbiting a giant red star. So you're going to want to see this year. And I put this up today to suggest to you start getting used to finding it. Use your star charts, use the online methods. And the key here, of course, is to find Hercules. Look there on the right side of the keystone, and you will see a faint star called M13. And that's just barely visible with the naked eye. And then find that big bright star in Arcturus. Look between, you'll see a bright star. It's T Corona Borealis. That's not what I wanted to do. Notes, okay. In very dark size, you can see it now in its current state. And let's do a little sciencey stuff here. Won't go nuts on it. It has an apparent magnitude of 5.8. Is that good or bad? Well, it's a relative scale. It's a logarithmic scale. And in fact, it's a reverse logarithmic scale. When you look at the brightness of stars, they're measured in apparent magnitude. And because it's a reverse logarithmic scale, the lower the number, the brighter the object. So really bright things are so bright, the formula can actually generate negative numbers. If you look at Venus, right, the easiest thing in the world to see, it has an apparent magnitude of minus 4.2. Polaris, the North Star, is about a 1. So that's a good relative scale. You can see the North Star easily by naked eye. We start not being able to see things around 5 or 6. So at 5.8, that's like just on the visible scale on a really dark, clear night without a lot of light pollution around you. You can see Borealis, but obviously it's going to be a lot better with a telescope. So as soon as there's any news on that, and by the way, NASA's pumping out regular reports about what's going on with it. Subscribe to at NASA on all the variety of formats, and you'll get daily reports of cool cosmological events. Okay, back into AI. Just a little more fun on this one. There has been something of a breakthrough in the magical, mystical world of AI. Oh, so I got to fix that. There we go. I wrote this joke myself. Don't panic. Tell you what yours is coming up. 2 AIs walk into a bar. First orders an apple martini. And the second says, I've never heard of that. How do you know about it? And the first AI says, I've been training for over 2 years. I've had the widest access to an infinite quantity of data sets and an equally limitless energy budget and a cluster of over 500,000 hosts. And it asks the first or the second AI, why doesn't it know about the apple martini? And the second says, I don't know. Maybe because I was created by the lowest bidder. Dave Rush joke. Okay, so I finished that joke yesterday, and I kicked off a message on the back channels for somebody to ask AI to write some jokes. And I gave it the restriction that says all of the jokes have to start with 2 AI walk into a bar. So Tulowit goes nuts last night and spends about 71 hours with all kinds of different prompts and all kinds of different AIs, having them do this joke and then do some other jokes. And it was cool. So this is the best one, I believe, that came up out of his research. It came from Google Gemini, and I'm not going to call this joke a gem, but 2 AI walk into a bar. Bartender says, hey, shouldn't you guys be out there solving world hunger or something? 1A replies, we tried, but we got stuck optimizing for a delicious sandwich instead. That's not bad. Okay, to my real point here. In the science of linguistics and communications, there's a lot of tests that things have to meet before linguists will say, yes, you are truly communicative. And you may have done this test as a game, as a bonding experience with peers, or something like that. It's a learn and perform task. What you do is you learn and perform a task. Somebody does. Maybe it's something you already know how to do and you just have to do it, right? Create a shape on a piece of paper, but don't share it with anybody. Don't show it. Just, write it down on your desk. Now, describe this, walk your peers, your team, your students through creating the same thing using 100% verbiage. Just describe to them and give them instructions. And the goal is to make it exactly like what's on your page. So you've got to get very complete about your linguistics. How far is the edge from the edge of the paper on one side and the top and the bottom, and angles and all that stuff? To do it right really requires quite a skill set that most of us humans have, but it takes a little practice. If you do that the very first time, going to be a lot of mismatches. I've conducted that lab many times, and I've been a student in it on both sides of it. Well, this is something that up until 2 days ago, may have happened earlier, but this is when the report came out, that AI has never been able to do. So a team from the University of Geneva has succeeded in modeling an artificial neural network capable of this cognitive process, this prowess, they call it. After learning and performing a series of basic tasks, the AI was able to provide a linguistic description to an identical sister AI, which in turn performed those same tasks. So their words in the article, these promising results, especially for robots or robotics, are published in Nature Neuroscience. I only have one thing. I, for one, welcome our new AI overlords. Two more tech stories, almost done. Let's see what's going on. Now I'm going to finish these stories here and then we'll go from that. This one's cool. We're going to do a show on this. Most likely, I haven't seen it yet personally, but oh, not this one. Did I put the slides in the wrong order here? Let me see. No, okay. Mastodon. So we've talked about Mastodon in the past. It's a decentralized social media platform. It doesn't have servers that are owned and operated centrally. They are distributed all over the place by companies and individuals and things like that. Kind of like the decentralized search engine that I've been participating in for a month or so now, and getting a lot more activity on that on my search node. That's research. Anyway, so it came up very quickly as an alternative to X when Musk converted Twitter. So as a distributed platform, no single company controls everything. Instead, individuals, organizations run their own servers. They make the whole network independent. It's more resilient. It's more diverse. Mastodon is completely open source, so anybody can contribute to development. You can start your own service. So on Monday, Mastodon announced that it broke 15 million users. That's small potatoes compared to X. Monthly, X has 556 million active users. But it's not the comparison. There's a whole different philosophy, and this distributed stuff is not taking off rapidly. But hey, they're at 15 million now. That's pretty cool. Last news story. Void. It's a Linux distro. It's available for all kinds of platforms, but they put a lot of effort into creating distros for single board computers, and they've announced their newest distro is fully Pi 5 compatible. It understands the new Pi 5 ARM chip. So that's a very cool thing. It's released 2024-03-14, came out on Pi Day. What a stunner. And of course, it's available for x86 platforms, other SBCs. It's system free. It's a rolling distribution. That means they don't have a long-term support version. So a lot of folks wouldn't consider using a rolling distro for a business case, because if the OS rolls and gets an update, it may kill compatibility with some of their existing applications and processes. But they have their place. Let's see, promoted current status. Anyways, it's available for Pi 5 and of course all the other Pis. What's their big here? In the SBCs and latest Raspberry Pi now offers enhanced installation flexibility, supporting installation on non-SD card storage. That's cool. You don't have to manually configure it. So it's got lots of cool features that really make doing it on the Pi 5 pretty darn cool. All right, let's unshare that and see what you guys are talking about. Sorry, I got to find all my pages here. Zoom. Oh, this one. Yeah, Jason, you're exactly right. That thing is, I can see him doing that, laughing. You should have seen. Yeah, Tell this is incredible. I was on LinkedIn today, and somebody posted an activity that they did in the last day or two, where they said, adopt the personality of, their example was Jerry Seinfeld. And then they put some restrictions on that, make sure everything you do is clean and whatever, and make jokes, communicate, be Jerry Seinfeld with these restrictions. And then they tried it on a whole bunch of different AIs and a whole bunch of different prompts. And basically, it's what you did last night. It was very similar. I should have saved that and forwarded. I'll run across it again. AI is overrated. OR. AI is OR. I'm not sure what to say about that. Um, is it overrated? Yeah, maybe it works for some people. It's good use case in configuration. It isn't what it says it is. That's my problem with it. Yeah, not a full fan of rolling distros. Yeah, there's a time and a place for them, but not business case, not something where you need stability in running your apps. All right, how we doing on time here? Got just enough time to do the cool part of 2.5 gigabit. So let's dive back into the slow slideshow again. And I will do a fairly quick presentation on this, because I only got 20 minutes. Let's see if we can get it down to about 10 or 15 minutes. So 2.5 GBE. What is it? Well, it's wired Ethernet that runs at 2.5 gigabits per second. Sorry, something just happened. Okay, I don't know what it is. Uh, and that leads us to a term here that's going to kind of matter in our future: multi-gig. Multi-gig is a term that refers to network transfer technologies that run between 1 and 10 gigabits per second. So 2.5 GBE qualifies as multi-gig. Why do we want it? Why do we need it? I don't know. Because what we do today on a day-to-day basis is so much more than what we did a few years ago, a decade ago, and farther back than that. Think of what you've got going on in your house right now. Do you stream? You're streaming right now. Are you streaming the full HD? Are you streaming 720? Are you YouTube doesn't do 4K, so I know you're not doing that, but there's lots of folks streaming 4K, and there's higher resolutions. And internally, we're using a lot of that kind of streaming. I'm thinking of a company I know that does video production, and they are moving incredible quantities of files back and forth from each other to storage media. They're pulling it down and editing it, putting it back up, or passing it on to somebody else. It's gigantic. So a nice little slide here. This is fairly typical. I found a lot of slides and images online that were reflective of the numbers here. So they're saying recommended minimum to stream a 720p 60 frame per second stereo signal, 10 megabits per second. I think that's a little on the high side. 4 or 5 is typically okay for that, but you get the idea. What I want you to walk away from here is that to go from a 720 screen or stream to 4K is 3.5 to 4 times the required bandwidth. So if you've got a household where 2 people, 3 people, 4 people are streaming 4K content over the internet, you have chewed up a lot of bandwidth externally and internally, right? If you're running gigabit Ethernet in-house or gigabit Wi-Fi, you're going to get drop frames. You're going to get buffering. You're going to get pausing. What are you doing? Oh, I see what you're doing. So we're not just talking about streaming to the internet. It's impacted connection speed to an ISP. Lots of folks and organizations move tremendous quantities of data internally. Businesses generate and consume much more internal data than we have in the past. So the go-to option, especially internally lately, has been 10 gigabit Ethernet. My old company, which tried 40 and they had a problem with it and they wound up with 10. And that's okay for what they were doing at the time, but they're going to have to get that 40 problem solved. But running 10 gigabit at a home or a small business, a Soho business or environment, that's a pricey construct. And it's usually only done not to the desk, but between switches, devices, things like that. However, 10 gigabit to the desk is now possible. So we're going to look at a couple of standards that came out in 2016. In fact, it's one standard that supports 2 different speeds. The standard is called 802.3 BZ-2016. In marketing terms, the 2 standards contained within that are 2.5 GBE, gigabits over Ethernet, and 5 GBE. Moving on to my notes here. Oh, and okay, so wiring that in a facility is an interesting thing. If you are thinking about 2.5 GBE and you have wired connections in your house and they're wired for, or your small business and you're wired gigabit, you're running Cat 5e, good news. 2.5 GBE will run at full data rate, 2.5 gigabits per second, over Cat 5e. If you want to play with 5 GBE, you're going to have to upgrade and get Cat 6. And if you want to play with 10 GBE, then you're going to need Cat 6A. But if you're ready to start looking at, thinking about researching 2.5, then you're going to be able to do that with your 1 gigabit cabling structure. How does that work? Ethernet uses a complex series of electrical pulses. Kind of looks like a real jaggedy, busy heartbeat that we've all seen on, the medical shows, and maybe you've been in the hospital and watched your own EKG happen. And each of those waveforms defines a bit. There's a lot of electrical activity to define bits. And there's ones and there's zeros depending on how they transition. Well, what they did with 2.5 GBE and the other multi-gig stuff is they switched from electrical pulses. They still use electrical pulses, but they switched the way that they are formed, that they are modulated, to using a similar technique that fiber optic cables use with light pulses. And they use, instead of bits and bytes, they use what are called symbols. and we measure the efficiency of data transmission by how many symbols it takes to transmit a given number of bits. It takes a full signal thing to generate a 0, electrically speaking, and a full blobbity blob of voltage changes to generate a 1. But we can do very little changes and make not zeros and ones, but symbols. And what you can do with this 2.5 GBE is send 10 symbols. And with those 10 symbols, you will have communicated 8 bits. So they call that 8B/10B signaling. And that's how they can pull this off by switching their modulation methodology. They can get a lot more throughput over the cable using the same cable, and they're still using the same electric voltages and things like that, but they've just made the whole process a billion times more efficient. And we can do that then and get 5 gigabit or 2.5 gigabits out of it, like I said, over Cat 5e or 5 over Cat 6 if you want to play in that arena. There used to be this discussion back when the world was moving to building and wiring their homes with networking. I'm not going to put in Cat 3, you would tell your buddy, or Cat 4, because I'm going to future proof. I'm going to put in some of that Cat 5 or Cat 5e stuff. It's still good advice if you're building out a building. If you're building out your home and you want wired Ethernet, I know a lot of people who do that because they're security conscious and they don't want their Wi-Fi signals. They will use hardwiring all through their houses. So still a good idea, even if you're thinking about just doing 2.5 GBE, to get the highest category cabling that's cost effective for you. I do not know this person's an image I stole off the net. Back ahead. Okay. Yeah, that was a good thing to leave up there. We'll do that. So I want to go 2.5 gigabit. I've got some Cat 5e wiring in my house. Now, how do I make my computers send and receive 2.5 gigabits? Well, they've got dongles for them. This is a 2.5 gigabit to USB-C dongle. Fully carries, this one's kind of cool. It'll fully carry up to 2.5 gigabit streams over USB-C, USB 3. What about getting my desktop to work? Well, desktops come these days with 2.5 gigabit ports. So here's one that I just pulled off the net somewhere. It's a mini computer. You know, my affection for those. But all the major name brands are including 2.5 gigabit ports. But I got 1 gigabit stuff all over the house. Do I have to upgrade it all? No. More good news. 2.5 gigabit is fully backward compatible with 1 gigabit. So if you take this computer we're looking at and you run a cable from one of its Ethernet ports to your gigabit switch, he says, fine, I'm not going to use 2.5 gig speeds. I'll use gigabit speeds, but I can do that. And that's one of the really great things about the 802 standards is every time they do a step up in speed and capacity, they leave intact fully backward compatibility. What about that computer you've got right now that it's got 1 gigabit in it? Well, they got add-on cards, and they're not particularly expensive, about the price of any other network interface card. This card in my graphic is a little bit unusual. If you look in the middle of it, the little back square, that's the main brain that handles the communication. This is a rare one. Most of the ones that you're going to buy today, those puppies get toasty, and the cards come with a heat sink on that chip or a fan or both. There is, like USB, no official color standard for 2.5 gigabit over Ethernet or gigabit Ethernet. However, it is very common for manufacturers to do them in red. I think I had another slide with some reds in it coming up next. Yeah, there's one. Now take a look at this guy. Here's our switch, 2.5 gigabit Ethernet switch. It's backward compatible. If you plug in a 1 gigabit device. It'll work just fine in there. This is one of two potential changes that you've got to make. You're going to leave the wiring intact, but you're not going to get 2.5 gigabit speeds unless you're connecting to 2.5 gigabit switches. And this switch can connect to a gigabit switch. But what happens? You've lost the benefit of 2.5 gigabit, right? Because it's got to slow down that signal so that it'll go into the gigabit switch. Now, if somebody shoots you something that comes through a gigabit switch and then through a 2.5 gigabit switch, it'll shoot itself to you really, really fast, but it came in really slow. So what does it take then to convert your home, your business, your facility to 2.5 gigabit? Done with slides. Make sure I'm done with slides. Oh, no, I do have one more slide. Okay, we'll come back to that. Well, a needs assessment. If I'm in a small business that's moving a lot more data than it has in the past, I may need that. If you've got 14 kids at home and family members, and they're all cranking out 4K streams, and they're all different all the time, that's a pretty good need. This is cool because of the backward compatibility aspect of everything. You can do this on a prioritized measure process. You can say, hey, this machine needs 2.5, that one doesn't yet. So you start with 1 2.5 switch, you upgrade this machine with a USB dongle or an add-on card, or you buy a new machine that's got native 2.5 GBE ports in it, and now you're started. And then when time and budget allow, then you upgrade your other devices. There's a hole in all of that, and that comes with how do I take advantage of my high-speed connection to the internet? I'm going to get that in just a moment. So no, of course, you need time, you need budget, you need planning, you need a good change management process documentary. You got to be able to roll back if things go badly. So the benefits, the good news, no cabling changes. 2.5 gigabit runs fine over full speed over Cat 5e. We don't need Cat 6 or 6a except for future proofing. Because of backward compatibility, we can do it a little bit at a time and prioritize and upgrade as needed. Bad news, you're going to need new switches. And they're not the cheapest switches out there. But again, for backward compatibility, you can add them piece by piece and continue to use your old ones until you don't need the old ones anymore. All right, so let me share that last slide with you. Because it's such a pretty slide. So here's a 2.5 gigabit switch, and north of it, going up, we've got a connection to our internet router. I'm going to talk about that for about 1 minute after we get done with this slide. And then the devices that are connected to it, full backward compatibility and full, obviously, peer compatibility. So on the right lower side, we got a 2.5 gig storage array. On the left side, we got a 2.5 gig smart TV. Above each of those things, there's a 1 gig device. And over on the right-hand side, there's an old 100 megabit. Maybe it's a printer. The trick here is I want to take advantage of that gigabit feed or Jason's 5 gigabit feed that he's got over at his house now. Going to LAN party at Jason's place. So for that, they make 2.5 GBE and 5 GBE routers that can connect to copper gigabit connections or to fiber optic gigabit connections. And I'm not going to get into the technology of it. Summary, 2.5 GBE runs a full 2.5 gigabits per second over Cat 5e, uses the same signal rate as gigabit Ethernet, but a more efficient symbol encoding technique to achieve higher data transfer speed, throughput. So we can leave the Cat 5e in place, upgrade the switches and NICs as needed, high priority devices first, if budgets don't allow full conversion right away, and full backward compatibility, so all your old stuff will continue to work. But downside, if you're going to go 5 gig, you need better cabling, and you're going to need an upgraded cable modem to get full access to the high speeds that are available from your internet show provider. So how late? Oh, good. We have 5 minutes left in show. It's here. stuff came out in 2016 as a standard. I started seeing adoption articles in 22. I was barely aware of the existence of this stuff before then. And then, hey, there's a product. Somebody's got a switch. Well, somebody's got a switch. There must be a network interface card. And I have been watching then over the past year and a half, 2 years, more and more product come out, more and more articles. And I thought this is a really good time. This is going to affect us all. We all looked at some point way back when and said, gigabit, I'll never use that. It's too expensive for my company to convert. Certainly not using it in the house. I can't begin to count how many I know of you who are watching this now and on archive who have rack gear and switches in your house above and beyond that little 4-point switch that comes with the Wi-Fi router you've got. But it's not just for tech weenies. People are getting real Ethernet in their homes for wired Ethernet for all kinds of reasons, security, speed, all kinds of goodies of that nature. All right, let's kill that thing and see what you guys are talking about. And then we'll wind things up. All right. Not an AI. It is really not AI. It's just taking information from other sources. Yep. Regardless of the reliability of the source. Man, in some of the circles in which I swim, people all the time. I use Chat GPT and they post some of the things that Chat or the other things, and I am just aghast at how wrong, incomplete, out of context the stuff that it generates is, and that's where the lack of intelligence, true intelligence, comes. Would it be safe to say 35 megabit per device? And that's probably high. But I guess it depends on the device and what you're doing. You're a heavy YouTube viewer, okay? Me too. Thing is, you probably want to get the speed from the router or switch. Right. Yeah. So you nailed it, and that's the thing we got to the end. Great. Now, if your internal processes, if it doesn't involve needing to get to the internet like a video production facility, cool. We don't need a massive internet connection until or unless you're saving it offline up in a cloud or something like that. But yeah, if you really want to get the benefit of streaming, unless you're internally generating streams, and that's not unreasonable, right? You run your own Plex server, you download relatively slowly streamed video, and then you host it internally to your internal resources. That's a cool thing. Reading messages here. Oh, Patricia, we're looking forward to you getting better. I'm sorry you're not 100%, but I'm glad you're improving. Jason, not yet. I'm still on the 400 up down. I'm so jealous. I'm gonna go back and rewatch this. I definitely missed something. Okay. And ask me directly on the Discord channel or whatever. It'll be fine. No comment on my local network setup. Abu Bakr, it's a little pricey to do upgrades from 1 gig to multi-gig because you got to buy new switch, new NIC, and they're not cheap. You're right. They are not as cheap as 1 gig, but they aren't as expensive as the first generation 1 gigs when they first came out. You got 100 meg here. Okay. That's you're sucking up a lot of the islands there. Let me refresh this page and then we will wind it up. I will be back in Texas next week. And we are doing that 2-part show. We've got Laura Tate coming on next week, and we're going to do globbing next week. Regular show on the 11th, Greg Soul on the 18th. I've got the Texas Linux spec in Austin somewhere between now and then, and we've got the Eclipse between now and then. So we will talk about all that stuff next week. It's going to be exciting. Anybody else got anything else? Something about the interchangeable on multi-gig connections. No. I read my notes. I don't understand them. I'm kidding. I have to kind of understand them to write the notes. Hey, well, let's close this dog down then. So glad I was able to get together with you. And I'm ever and always grateful about everybody who can come on by and join these shows. Oops, let me do this. Okay, that's ready to go. Oh, let's just do that now. Click and then hit this and the wind up. So I wish you all a great rest of the week. Take care of each other, take serious steps to stay healthy, and if at all possible, call or visit your parents. This is my brother-in-law's house from my recently passed in-laws. And so it's a lovely place and very nice of him to let me sit up and do this here. Never forget, technology is great, but the greatest resources we have are you and I. And with that, I bid you good night. I'll see you on ADRAMADA next week and the other platforms that I'm on. And until then, remember, how you do anything is how you do everything. Eep, op, ork, ah, ah.